In 1992, the heart of the Balkans began to tear itself apart. Yugoslavia, once a federation of 6 republics, had collapsed. Nationalism filled the void.
In Bosnia and Herzegovina, 3 groups lived side by side: Bosniaks, Croats, and Serbs.
When Bosnia declared independence, the Bosnian Serb leadership refused to accept it. Backed by Serbia's military, they launched a campaign to carve out their own state.
The capital, Sarajevo, once a symbol of unity and the host of the 1984 Winter Olympics, became the first target. In April 1992, the city was surrounded, cut off from the outside world, trapped for nearly 4 years.
What followed was the longest siege in modern European history, a city under constant fire, and a tragedy the West chose to ignore.
When the fighting began, Sarajevo was not prepared for war. It was a city of artists, students, and families, a multicultural capital where mosques, churches, and synagogues shared the same skyline. But in spring 1992, that skyline became a battlefield.
Bosnian Serb forces, backed by the Yugoslav People's Army, moved quickly into the hills surrounding the city. They seized the high ground and used it to seal every road, every valley, and every escape route possible.
Within days, Sarajevo was cut off from the rest of the world. Electricity failed, water systems shut down, telephone lines went silent. Nearly 500,000 civilians were trapped inside, with no way out and no way to bring help in.
In the first few weeks, people still believed it would end quickly. They thought the international community would intervene. They thought the shelling would stop. But the siege was only beginning, and the international community would watch from afar.
From the surrounding mountains, artillery batteries opened fire. Mortars, shells, and rockets rained down on neighbourhoods, and the Bosnian Serb snipers took positions in offices and apartment blocks. They had clear lines of sight onto the city's main streets. Locals would give one road a name that would echo around the world: Sniper Alley.
For the people of Sarajevo, the siege became a way of life, and nowhere was safe.
Water was scarce, which meant people queued for hours at public taps or collected water from the river. The simple act of filling a container could draw fire from the hills. In addition, food was scarce. Many residents survived on aid packages alone, made up of rice, flour, and tins of processed meat. They survived on only 150 grams of food per day.
Crossing roads carried huge risk as snipers watched from the hills and the high-rise buildings. People would run and zigzag across the streets to try and avoid the bullets. Life had to go on, and schools moved underground. Classrooms shifted into basements and bomb shelters, with children studying by torchlight, with the thud of artillery in the background.
Hospitals were overwhelmed. Surgeons worked without anaesthetic, electricity, or sometimes clean water. The wounded were carried in through the back doors and hidden corridors, anything to try and stay out of a sniper's sight. The city's main hospital admitted between 5 and 15 wounded sniper victims a day.
In 1993, as desperation grew, the people of Sarajevo dug underneath the airport runway, the only strip of land under UN control. In secret, using hand tools and lanterns, they carved a narrow passageway through the earth. When it opened, the Sarajevo tunnel became the city's lifeline. Through that cramped, dark tunnel came food, medicine, weapons, and hope. But even with the tunnel, the suffering did not end. The shelling continued. The snipers remained. For nearly 4 years, Sarajevo lived like this, a European capital reduced to hunger, fear, and endurance. As Sarajevo burned, the world debated. Night after night, images from the city appeared on television screens across Europe and North America. Broken buildings, children carried on stretchers. Viewers were shocked. Politicians expressed sympathy, but action was something else.
The United Nations sent peacekeepers, but with a limited mandate. They were allowed to observe, but not to fight. Safe zones were declared across Bosnia, but Sarajevo, under constant bombardment, remained exposed. Aid convoys tried to enter the city. Sometimes they made it through. Sometimes they were turned back at gunpoint.
Western nations feared escalation. They argued over who was responsible, who had the right to intervene. While they debated, the shelling continued.
In 1994, Sarajevo had absorbed tens of thousands of artillery hits. Entire districts were reduced to concrete skeletons. Journalists risked their lives to document the suffering. Their reports shocked the world, but did not move it.
For nearly 4 years, Sarajevo waited for decisive action. And for nearly 4 years, the world allowed the siege to continue. It would take several atrocities before the international community finally chose to act, including a genocide at Srebrenica, a supposed United Nations safe zone, in which 8,000 men and children were brutally killed.
In 1995, the war in Bosnia had reached a breaking point. The Siege of Sarajevo had dragged on for more than 1,400 days. A European capital had endured nearly 400,000 shells. Then, on August 28, 1995, a mortar round struck the Mikhail market, a busy street filled with ordinary people buying food. 43 civilians were killed. More than 70 were injured. It was a second massacre at the same market, and this time, the world could no longer look away.
Within days, NATO launched Operation Deliberate Force, targeting Bosnian Serb positions around Sarajevo and across Bosnia. For the first time in the war, the international community acted with force. Under military pressure and diplomatic isolation, the besieging force withdrew their heavy weapons.
In December 1995, the Dayton Peace Agreement was signed. The war was over. Bosnia and Herzegovina was left divided, politically, socially, and emotionally. But Sarajevo had survived. The city rebuilt its streets, its homes, but the scars remained. Shell damage still marks the walls of apartment blocks. Red Sarajevo roses on the pavement show where mortar blasts once ended lives. 14,000 people were killed during the siege. Over 1,600 of them were children. It was the longest siege in modern European history, and one of the darkest chapters of the Bosnian War.
The people of Sarajevo endured unimaginable suffering, and many never lived to see peace. And yet, their story, their resilience, is often forgotten. This was the Siege of Sarajevo, the genocide the West forgot.